VSiN Weekend Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Hour number 2 of the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. I'm your host, Tim Murray, live from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas. Ahead, another great day. Hopefully as good as yesterday. Maybe we'll have another 4 home run performance like we saw in a losing effort last night in Arizona. The Diamondbacks lose 8-7 in extra innings to the Atlanta Braves, but Eugenio Suarez goes yard 4 times, just the 19th player in Major League Baseball history to have a 4 home run performance. So we get that yesterday. We get a buzzer beater with Aaron Gordon dunking home Nikola Jokic's pass, and they win 101-99. So what's in store for us today? We will see. And we will also find out the latest on the ice. 4 games on the ice. We saw all 4 teams that were down 0-2 win on Friday night, and now they're all back on the ice today, and Todd Fuhrman is going to join us here in less than 15 minutes. Zach Cohen going to join us at the bottom of the hour, and he will give us his thoughts on today's NBA card. We just mentioned we've got that Killer Sports NBA Playoff Challenge rolling on right now, similar to what we did during the College Hoops Contest, that creation made by Matt Humans when Paul Stone just absolutely destroyed all of us. Happy to get second, though. We've got that challenge going on, so make sure you check out all of the picks that come in over at vsin.com/picks. Those picks will be made official coming up at the noon Eastern hour. But we just spent the last 2 segments talking about Cam Ward to Tennessee and the situation in Cleveland. And I just want to state this, but I enjoyed talking to Jonathan Peterlin, and you could sense his hesitancy on Dillon Gabriel, but I thought he had a couple of interesting notes there. He thinks that Kenny Pickett will ultimately be the casualty of the group. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's not going to play this year with the popped Achilles, and I would guess right now, if I had to make a wager, I think most of us would, probably will never play another down as a Cleveland Brown. You've got Joe Flacco, you've got Kenny Pickett, Dillon Gabriel, 3rd round pick, and then they go out and they get Shedeur Sanders. I love the fit for Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski and that offense, and Tommy Rees now the OC. But I wanted to run through a couple of the offensive players, and we talked a bunch about them yesterday, that I am intrigued by heading into this year, and we'll kind of lump it into some of the odds for Offensive Rookie of the Year. If you're wondering, Shedeur Sanders sits at 25-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Look, I can't recommend that right now. We'll see how it all plays out. If he has a chance to win this job, I don't think he will, but we'll see how it all plays out. But he's 25-1 right now to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm looking at FanDuel. As always, look around. I know DraftKings has some odds up as well. Our guy, Chuck Esposito, kept man to his word. He said yesterday on the show that he was going to put up some Offensive Rookie of the Year odds, and he did so over at the Stations Casino if you're here in Las Vegas. And he put up my guy, Caleb Johnson, at 50-1. So had to take a little morsel on my guy, Caleb Johnson, the latest Pittsburgh Steeler. We'll get to what Omar Khan said about him and the other Pittsburgh Steelers, but I want to play you a clip from Sean Payton, because throughout the process, there was a belief that the Broncos were interested in Ashton Jeanty. And ultimately, picking at 20, that was going to be too rich to get up. And the Las Vegas Raiders, whether they threw out a bunch of smoke screens or not, they ended up grabbing him at number 6. What is funny, and I want to look back here real quickly about the Ashton Jeanty situation. So I tweeted this out on Thursday night, which was the odds for where players would ultimately be drafted. And all throughout the process. Now, I know on Thursday night, we opened up the draft coverage. Matt and I looked at our mock drafts, and Matt and I both agreed that we had buyer's remorse on a ticket that we had on Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders. Ashton Jeanty to go to the Raiders on draft day at DraftKings was plus 450. and he ends up going there. There was a moment in time where he was like minus $1.50, maybe even more expensive to go to the Raiders. And then everything shifted. It was the Jags became the favorite. Then the Bears became the favorite. At one point, the Bears were minus 190 to select Ashton Genty, and he ultimately lands with the Raiders. But that's a story about the Denver Broncos. So the Denver Broncos apparently wanted Ashton Genty, but they couldn't get him. He was too high up. It was going to be too expensive. So in the first round, they go Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas, much to my delight, to be the second cornerback selected. And then in the second round, they drafted UCF running back R.J. Harvey. And this is Sean Payton talking about the situation that ultimately led to the Broncos falling in love with the UFC running back.
He was, in the early part of this process, man, everyone had seen the skill set of Genty, and he's a fabulous player. And then you're, all right, if that's unrealistic, which obviously where he was selected, everyone knew we were hoping to get it back. Man, where are we falling in love with somebody? And you really try to just go through each one with an open mind. And I can remember the afternoon. I can't remember what afternoon, but I can remember the 2 hours on this player. And then it was like, all right, be quiet.
Look, Sean Payton doesn't mince words. This is the dude that basically told us last year, I'm picking Bo Nix. Believe it. Some people, me, were like, nah, he's not going to pick Bo Nix at 12. He's not a first-round quarterback. Oh, no, he's going to pick Bo Nix at 12. So R.J. Harvey goes in the second round to the Broncos. And if you remember back to last year, we never knew who the hell the running back was going to be in Denver. Was it going to be McLaughlin? Was it going to be Estime? I remember at one point in time, not that anyone cares about my fantasy team, but there were fantasy owners or people who, have meaningful opinions from the fantasy standpoint who told us to pick up Audric Estime. From the sounds of it right now, boy, doesn't it sound like R.J. Harvey's going to be the dude in Denver? Second round is a hell of a lot of capital to spend on a running back. And that's what I am excited about. This running back class, headlined by Ashton Genty, obviously, is awesome. And I think you're going to see a lot of these dudes be productive in year number one, which from a betting standpoint makes it ultra intriguing for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Right now, looking at the odds, Genty is the co-favorite at FanDuel at plus 350 with Cam Ward. Then there's Travis Hunter. Then if we look a little bit further down the list, you've got Omarion Hampton, who that pick, we'll see how it plays out, but that was a bit perplexing, knowing that the Chargers went out and got Najee Harris from Pittsburgh, but they get Omarion Hampton. Okay, fine, at 22. Then you've got Travion Henderson going to New England in the second round, but surprisingly, Quinshon Judkins is drafted ahead of him by the Cleveland Browns. Travion Henderson, 20-1. Judkins is 25-1. And I'll say this, man. I know about the Denver Broncos, and we'll call on Mike Sanford again because yesterday we spent more time focusing on quarterbacks. But R.J. Harvey and Caleb Johnson both sit at 50-1. R.J. Harvey, who you just heard from Sean Payton, was a dude they fell in love with. For a running back room that we had no idea who was going to be the guy a year ago in Denver. So maybe I'm putting too much stock into the words we heard from Sean Payton. I'm like 50-1 on R.J. Harvey. Seems like he might be a dude that's pretty intriguing. And then my guy, Caleb Johnson. So yesterday, a lot of the discussion on this show was obviously about where Shedeur Sanders would ultimately go. And was it surprising that at pick 83, the Pittsburgh Steelers did not select Shedeur Sanders? I guess it wasn't that surprising because the Pittsburgh Steelers had multiple chances to take Shedeur Sanders, and they did not, maybe indicating Aaron Rodgers could be coming to town. So let's circle it back to Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson, 50-1, a bet that I did make to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Ultra productive running back at Iowa. Dane Brugler had him as his third best running back. Let's hear from Omar Khan, the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, on not just Caleb Johnson, but the haul that they brought in on draft night.
For us, really feel like we're a better football team today than we were before the draft started on Thursday. Like I said, we filled several needs, and I think the term was used a couple days ago about Steelers DNA. And I think when you guys get to know these guys, you'll realize that these guys have Steelers DNA.
Yeah, Caleb Johnson has Steelers DNA, man. The dude was a monster at Iowa for an offense, as we all know, never always that aesthetically pleasing. But Caleb Johnson's a dude. Two other guys that I'm very curious about, and we'll talk more about. Emeka Egbuka going to Tampa, I think immediately impacts that team. I love Emeka Egbuka. Thought he was underrated at Ohio State, which is crazy to say, but he was phenomenal. Fits there in that slot. And then the guy that was kind of the Pro Bowl, one of the Pro Bowl, Senior Bowl, stars was Jalen Royals out of Utah State. And anytime you put a wide receiver with Patrick Mahomes, you just assume there's going to be production. And I'm not saying Jalen Royals is someone I want to play to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, but knowing what we knew about Royals and how well he played down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, now that he links up with Patrick Mahomes, it could be pretty interesting to see how that plays out there in Kansas City. Thor Nystrom will join us in the final hour of the show. We'll get more thoughts on the NFL draft, some of his favorite selections, ones that he did not like as well. But let's turn our attention to the ice. We got 4 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs today. Todd Fuhrman will preview them for us next.
To the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Sunday morning. I'm Tim Murray here in Las Vegas, the Circus Sportsbook, and not too far from where I sit, our next guest will join us via the Progressive Guest Line. We've got 4 games on the ice, 4 games on the hardwood, and I know a man that is chomping at the bit to sit on his couch and watch 4 hockey games all back to back to back to back, like Tom Amansky winning AAU baseball championships. Is Todd Fuhrman, who joins us right now, courtesy of our Progressive Guest Line. Todd, let's get to the intrigue and shocking. I start with a Washington Capital question, but who the hell's playing goalie tonight for Montreal and or Washington?
Well, Montreal at least tipped their hand. We're going to see Jacob Dobesh, the rookie out of the Czech Republic, that'll get the nod as Samuel Montembeault. Day-to-day, the official designation after that lower body injury he suffered in Game 3. Now, I know you hit on it at the top of the show. The Capitals, a little bit more intrigue if it will be Logan Thompson getting the nod, or we'll see Charlie Lindgren. The other injury to keep tabs on will be Alexi Protas, who's missed the first 3 games of this series. And he was a bit of a revelation for the Caps this year, provided them some ancillary scoring depth, and I think they'll really see an uptick in production if he's able to go. Watching the markets this morning, we're starting to see a slow trickle of Capitals money coming in. And look, Logan Thompson, no doubt an upgrade over Charlie Lindgren, but you at least have a veteran if Lindgren's called into action. I think you get a collective response that's significantly better from Washington. So I can understand why the Caps have taken a little bit of money and are starting to leak out to that 120 range across the board.
Yeah, so right now, looking at the market, as Todd just alluded to, 120 over my shoulder here at Circa. DraftKings a little bit higher at minus 122, but if you do want to get in on the Capitals at 120, that is the price that we sit right now. So I guess we'll just kind of go chronologically here, Todd, and we'll start with the game that gets going at the 1 o'clock Eastern window. St. Louis gets on the board. They get the win against the Jets on Friday. It was the bounce back day, right, for all of these teams, a desperation night. All these teams 0-2 getting wins on Friday. What do we make of St. Louis and Winnipeg right now? 5.5 juiced heavily under is the total, and Winnipeg finds themselves around a minus 134 or so favorite.
And this was a series coming into the first round that I think a lot of us anticipated was going to be lower scoring, dominated by defense and goaltending. It hasn't necessarily been the case. 2 out of the 3 games thus far have gone over the total. And when you look at some of the underlying metrics for both Jordan Binnington and Connor Hellebuck, they've underwhelmed given the performance we saw from them when they represented their respective countries in the 4 nations. But odds makers have not decided to flinch, and that's why this total still sits at 5.5, heavily shaded to the under. You mentioned where the number is with Winnipeg installed as about a 15-cent bigger favorite than what we saw in Game 3. You get a little bit of that desperation angle, and Winnipeg, more or less, look like they were perfectly content with that 2-0 series lead, because I would define the Game 3 effort as a no-show. Now, they'll get a little bit healthier on the blue line. Dylan DeMello missed the game due to injury, and while he's not a guy that's going to move the needle, it does change some of the depth and the minutes required further on down the board for some of these Jets blue liners. I know this total is tough, doesn't give you a ton of wiggle room, but I lean under the total. I'm curious to see if we'll get a little bit of movement. You know, I'm closer in that 5.5 under minus $1.50, so I'm not running to lay the $1.40 to go under now. We'll see if we get some late money. One thing to keep in mind with Connor Hellebuyck, I know questions starting to swirl yet again about his playoff prowess. It's now been 10 out of the last 12 starts for Hellebuyck in the postseason where he's given up 3 goals or more. But I think this is all about the collective defensive effort, and Winnipeg going to do everything they can to suppress scoring chances. So I look for Connor Hellebuyck's save number under as well in the low 20s. I think we could be looking at a 3-1 type Winnipeg victory.
5.5, as Todd mentioned, juiced under. Looking around, you could find a $1.40, $1.42 at DraftKings if you do want to roll with that under. Todd Fuhrman, CBS Sports HQ, of course, the founder of the Bet the Board podcast, which is always a must listen throughout the football season, joins us right now, courtesy of our progressive guest line. Carolina and New Jersey, we got the desperation bump, the double overtime win for the Devils, and now they find themselves as pretty significant underdogs at home. So they got on the board as I think around, what was it, like plus 130, plus 135 dogs on Friday night. And now, is this where the market should be on Carolina and New Jersey, around $1.70 favorite for the Hurricanes?
I actually think it's still a touch expensive. We go back and look at New Jersey's performance, not just in the desperate spot in Game 3, but even in Game 2. You can make the case that they were the better team than the Carolina Hurricanes. The one thing that surprised me quite a bit, though, about this series is how well both goaltenders have played. I mean, Jacob Markstrom and Freddie Anderson, through a limited sample size, number 2 and number 3 from a goal saved above expected so far in this first round. The only goaltender that's been better is Mackenzie Blackwood of the Colorado Avalanche. New Jersey's biggest issue, though, is they are extremely banged up on that blue line. I don't expect Luke Hughes or Brendan Dillon to return to the lineup today. Jonas Siegenthaler did return from an extended absence, and it wasn't a moment too soon as he needed to log a lot of those high-leverage minutes. But the Devils also lost Jonathan Kovacevic in that Game 3 victory against the Canes. So if Carolina is going to show some of their championship mettle, a team right now listed as the favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference, they need to jump on New Jersey and play with a sense of desperation themselves. So you understand why they're a $1.70, $1.75 favorite. I'll take a slightly contrarian approach, though, in this game and look to make a case to go over the total at 5.5. plus $1.15. I think if either of these goalies flinch or we get an early tally or two, this game can open up a little bit. So I think the market has gone a little bit too far. Slight value proposition going over the total at 5.5.
All right. Talk once again to Todd Fuhrman, courtesy of our progressive guest line. Speaking of totals, we're going to get to the Kings and Oilers here in just a moment, but I did want to circle back to Caps and Canadians. Right now, you see a 6.5 pop out there at one shop. I believe it was DraftKings who got all the way to 6.5. What do you make of this total for Caps Canadians? Obviously, we discussed the uncertainty in net for both of these squads. We've got a rookie netminder for Montreal, but is this gone too far based off of a 6-3 game we saw in Game 3? First games to go under. What do you make of the total in Washington, Montreal?
If you like the under, wait this thing out as long as possible, because once we finally figure out exactly who will start for the Washington Capitals, if Charlie Lindgren's announced in, you'll have a chance to go under 6.5, albeit a juice one, probably in that $1.20 range. And you're kind of sitting in no man's land. But credit the odds makers. They've made proper adjustments here. Game 1's total sat at 5.5 at minus $1.15 over. You mentioned the Game 3 game that got a little bit loose with those 9 goals. And I think the Capitals, quite honestly, are perfectly content to try and turn this into a little bit more of a track meet. The biggest challenge that they'll have again in Game 4 is what they can do to slow down that top line for Montreal. I mean, Cole Caulfield, Yuri Slafkovsky, and Nick Suzuki really got going. But if the Caps can clamp down there, I just don't see enough depth scoring for the Canadians to outscore the Caps in a spot like this. So understand why the over money's coming in, because of the uncertainty in net, not just for the Caps and what we'll see from Jacob Dobish, but at 6.5 shaded under, I'd be mildly intrigued to go under. still strongest lean in this game, though, is the road team laying that $120.
All right, let's get to the nightcap. And, man, this has been a fun series, no doubt. The Kings and the Oilers, we expected fireworks. We have gotten fireworks. Overs have hit in all three of these games. Godspeed if you want to play an under here. But we're at 6.5, juiced under, -20. The Oilers are a favorite. Before we get big picture on this series, where the Oilers are around a $2 underdog to come back and win this series, how do we look at tonight? We see the Oilers come back in that desperation spot on Friday night. Then you get a couple empty netters to make it window dressing 7-4. What do you make of this total, Todd, out to 6.5? And what do you make of a side in LA and Edmonton tonight north of the border?
Look, I was one of those fools that went under the total in game 2. I went under 6. I thought the market had moved a little bit too far. Little to say that result did not exactly work out well for my bankroll. And Darcy Kemper has struggled mightily, despite the Kings having a 2-1 series lead. I mean, from an underlying metric standpoint, he's given up more goals saved above expected than any netminder. Now, granted, it's a cumulative stat, and if Stuart Skinner played game 3 as well, Skinner probably would have him beat in that category. Calvin Pickard came in, didn't exactly stabilize the position, but Edmonton's 4-goal outburst in the third period got them across the finish line. Craziest part about this series, when you look at how volatile these games have been, the favorite has won all 3 of the games, and you've seen home teams hold serve. This number, though, continues to drift out, and whether I want to make the bet or not, my numbers are going to end up supporting the Kings at a price of plus $1.20 or better. I still have major concerns about the Oilers along the blue line. The absence of Matthias Ekholm has been readily apparent, and I think LA knows, despite the way that they performed the first 2 games, they've got to be a little bit more conscientious on the defensive side, get back to their structure and protect their goalie. I know Edmonton's a difficult out. They said all the right things after that comeback win in game 3, but I think this Oilers roster is flawed beyond Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, even as Trent Frederick and Evander Kane start to get their sea legs under them. I'll be looking to bet LA. Haven't jumped in yet, especially as we see this price continue to drift out. I would love a plus $1.30 on the Kings.
All right, we're going to wait on the Kings. We're going to see if the Capitals do bounce back, is looking the way for Todd Fuhrman. Todd, always appreciate the insight, man. Enjoy the games today.
Always a pleasure, Tim. You do the same. I know NBA and NHL will keep you plenty occupied, my friend.
Yes, indeed it will. Todd Fuhrman, check out the podcast, Bet the Board, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, catch him on CBS Sports HQ. We're going to talk some NBA here in just a little bit with Zach Cohen. Just a reminder, Derby Day, ladies and gentlemen, is almost here. So why not make your first bet your best bet? With First Bet, you can wager on Churchill Downs, Belmont Park, and tracks all around the world, all from your phone. Go to firstbet.com. That's the number 1, stbet.com. Enter the promo code VSiN200 for a $200 sign-up bonus. Don't miss out. Bet smarter on the Derby with First Bet. We're talking NBA playoffs with Zachary Cohen next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
Let's keep it rolling. It is the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. Thanks to Todd Fuhrman giving us his insight on the Stanley Cup playoff action today. Likes the Washington Capitals as a -120 favorite up there in Montreal. Still TBD on the goalie situation for the Caps. Logan Thompson is a game-time decision, but it does look like the backup will be the man for the Montreal Canadiens. So 4 games on the ice, 4 games on the hardwood. And to break it down for us, our own Zachary Cohen joins us courtesy of our progressive guest line right now, Zach. And it starts in Detroit with the New York Knicks and the Detroit Pistons. And this has been a fun series so far, very competitive. The Knicks get game 3 in Detroit, 118-116, kind of a wacky finish there. And now you've got Detroit, who opened as a dog, as a favorite here, -2, Zach. And I know you've got a crafty parlay shifted with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but looking at New York and Detroit, how do you feel about the prospects of the Pistons bouncing back here and evening up this series?
Yeah, I mean, I had a slight lean on the Pistons, which is why I ended up, playing a parlay where I did take some more points because I wanted to be a little bit safer with them. I just kind of think that these runs they've been giving up in these games are just a really bad sign of things to come. Where they're having these defensive lapses, having trouble scoring, and that's kind of the way I saw this series going before it started. I thought, there would be moments where Cade Cunningham wouldn't have anybody out there to help him, and that's kind of the way it is. I know Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, Dennis Schroeder, these guys are having their moments, but those are not reliable second options for very good teams. So I think the Knicks are, kind of getting off the hook a little bit for being a bad defensive team. And that's ultimately why I laid off Detroit. But I did, like you said, I played plus 7.5 with Detroit, parlayed with the Timberwolves plus 7.5 in that second game. I am interested in seeing this game, though. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it really is. Detroit, New York, start the day off with a 2-1 series. Thinking back, hindsight, I know a bunch of us, you, JVT, others, were talking about this price of the series just being way too inflated. New York may still get there, but it did seem like that price was off, and you could have got some, plus 1.5 type of deals on the Detroit Pistons there. Let's get to Lakers and T-Wolves. This was a game where we saw Luka a bit under the weather. LeBron played well most of the night. They tie the game up, and then the Timberwolves are able to pull away 13-1 run to close it out here. So this was a 4-point spread on Friday night, down to a 2.5-point spread today. You would imagine Luka probably plays a little bit better. What do you make of this spot here for Minnesota? An opportunity for the T-Wolves to really kind of put a stranglehold on this series if they're able to get this win here this afternoon.
Yeah, I think I have a lean on the Timberwolves here too. This is a really weird series for me because I think the general perception heading into it was that Los Angeles was the better team. And there really just isn't a lot that suggests that. Even if you kind of break down, the cleaning the glass lineup numbers with Austin Reeves, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James, they had an efficiency differential of plus 1.2 with those guys during the regular season. Since December, Minnesota's at plus 6.6 with just everybody. So I think the Timberwolves are the better team. I think dating back to December, they've been a top 5 team in both adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. And I also just kind of like the way that they match up with the Lakers when talking about, some of the small ball lineups that we're seeing. I think a lot of people thought the Lakers would be able to go small and kind of shoot them off the court. This Timberwolves team could really shoot the three. They have a few big guys that are, Naz Reid, Julius Randle, that aren't traditional centers, but when you size them up and play the 5, they're able to guard, the big guys on the Lakers and get by them too. So I just think this Timberwolves team's a little bit too long, athletic, and just good at shooting the 3 for the Lakers right now. So obviously I'm expecting a little bit of a better performance from Luka. Like you said, he was sick heading into that game, but it's really hard to lay off Minnesota completely when they're not laying that many points at home where it's very difficult to win.
Yeah, and we played the clip from earlier in the show where the T-Wolves were talking about how much they enjoy their home crowd there. Out to a minus $2 favorite to win this series are the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're talking to Zach Cohen, who joins us courtesy of our Progressive Guest Line. You can follow him on Twitter at BettingOnX, getting us ready for the 4 games today in the NBA. You do have a bet on this game. We're starting to see the market come in on Boston a little bit. You and I a little bit head-to-head. I did lay 6.5 last night with the Celtics. I don't love to lay it, but was curious about Celtics kind of bouncing back. Why ultimately are you looking at the Magic here as this number now drifts to 7.5 in a number of spots?
Yeah, I don't think this is a game the Magic are going to win. This is not like game 3 to me. I just kind of trust them to stay within the number because I do trust their defense. Like, I think this is a really ugly team to watch, but they have been a top 5 defensive team in adjusted defensive rating all season long. And I think just missing somebody like Drew Holiday, an extra playmaker for Boston, makes everything that much harder against an Orlando team that already makes things difficult on you. I also saw, Jaylen Brown is questionable with that knee injury that kind of ruined the end of the season for him. I'm not sure he's going to miss this one, but if he does, that's where the game gets interesting, and maybe you're talking about the Magic stealing it. But I will say Orlando, they won that game in game 3. They played really well defensively. They got 61 combined out of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, and I do think that there's room for improvement on offense for those two. I thought that they were really inefficient in scoring in that game, and I thought that the 3-point shooting for the entire team was a disaster. That's kind of what you expect with this Magic team. It's like it's not going to get that much better, but it can get a little better. Like guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Gary Harris, if they're going to be playing 25 minutes, those are guys that have knocked down threes in the playoffs their entire careers. So if they are going to be left open, I think they're going to knock down some more shots, and I do think Orlando's feeding off the energy of the crowd pretty well, and Boston's just in a weird situation where, they feel like they're going to win this series, but they have to fight for it every night. That's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a little similar to what we saw with OKC and Memphis. Memphis does cover both games, but obviously loses both games, and they've been swept away by the Oklahoma City Thunder. Senior editor of VSiN.com, Zach Cohen joining us here. All right, let's get to the late night game. We've got Indiana and Milwaukee. Circa just went to 4 in this game. Milwaukee the favorite. 4.5's out there if you do like the dog. Obviously, Milwaukee trailed at the half and then blew out Indiana in in the second half. But can we anticipate Gary Trent Jr. going absolutely nuclear from three? We know Giannis will be balling, but the other pieces, that's always the question here. What do you make of Indiana and Milwaukee tonight?
No, I mean, you took the case right out of my mouth. It's Gary Trent Jr. is not likely to score 30 plus again. So where's the offense going to come from outside of Dame and Giannis? And I do think that this Milwaukee team is really bad defensively, at least on the perimeter. So I think that there are better days ahead for, the Pacers guards like Nembhard and Alberton. I think both those guys can be trusted to get going again. And this is another one where it's like the Minnesota and the Lakers series with me. When you date back to December, which is kind of after a really slow start to the season for the Pacers. Since that time, Indiana's been top 7 in both adjusted offensive and defensive rating. It's just a really good team that I don't think is getting the type of respect it deserves. And I do think Milwaukee's not a really bad team, but a mediocre team at the very least. So I just think that you're getting 4.5 points with a better team. I would take it. I would probably sprinkle the money line too. I think this is going to be a series that ends in 6 or less easily.
Zach, let's circle back to Lakers and T-Wolves. You've got a player prop that interests you. So Julius Randle sits at 19.5 right now at DraftKings, juiced under -125, -105 to the over. What are you looking at with Julius Randle this afternoon against the Lakers?
Yeah, so Randall scored at least 20 in 2 straight. And after last game, Anthony Edwards told him, you got to take a lot more than 13 shots against this team. And he obviously went over his point total last game. He was doing that by getting to the free throw line. But I don't think it takes much convincing to get Julius Randle to shoot more. So I think if Anthony Edwards wants him to, we're going to see Randle shoot at least 15 times in this game. And I do not think the Lakers have an answer for him, at least if they're not playing Jackson Hayes, which is kind of why I think that this series is going Minnesota's way. If they're not going to play a legitimate center, there's no rim protection out there, and Randle is good enough to, just drive by every one of those perimeter wings that they have, whether it's LeBron, Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui Hachimura. Randle can get by them, or he can bully them, and he's going to knock down some threes too. He's shooting 34% from 3 at the Target Center. I think this is a game where we're going to see him knock down a few, but also get a lot going at the basket. I just don't think there's an answer for him on the Lakers.
Zach Cohen joining us here, helping us get ready for 4 games today. Looking ahead to tomorrow, Houston, Golden State. Golden State gets the win last night. A ridiculous performance by Steph Curry as he goes for 36, 9, and 7, Zach. We don't know the status of Jimmy Butler for Game 4. Right now, the market sits at 3.5. Golden State laying that at home tomorrow. Do we see a little bit of a bounce back here from the Houston Rockets?
I think so. I mean, I think if you look at last night's game, like the Warriors did do a lot of good things. Like I thought Steph was kind of dominant in that game, but like outside of that, there was a point where Gary Payton Jr. scored 9 points straight and knocked down a huge corner 3. And that's a guy that you really want to leave open. So I don't think Houston did anything particularly wrong. I just thought that they played a really poor offensive game. And I do think at some point in this series, we're going to see Fred VanVleet kind of snap out of it. Like he has been shooting terribly. That's a guy that has proven himself in a championship run before. I think that he can be trusted to knock down some shots and score a little bit. And Şengün was also getting some really good looks in the paint and was just kind of short-arming everything. I do think that the presence of Draymond Green and how well Draymond's been playing defensively in this series has been getting to him a little. But if you give me Şengün 5-footers, like I'm expecting him to make them, and I do think he's going to do that in Game 4. So I'm expecting this to be a much better effort out of Houston. Even if Jimmy's out there, I think that the Rockets are going to play a good, defensive game and just be a little bit better offensively.
Betting on X is where you can find him on social media. You could read him at VSiN.com. He's our senior editor, Zachary Cohen. Zach, best of luck with your bets today, man.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
There he is.
The weekend.
Yeah, much indeed. Hey, just a reminder, folks, check out our betting splits. You get the latest info from DraftKings and Circa, VSiN.com/subscribe. We'll give you a little insight on those betting splits next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
Busy day ahead of us with 4 games. I don't know why I said almost 2. 4 games. NBA playoffs, 4 games. Stanley Cup playoffs as well. Patrick Everson give us the latest insight from the NFL draft, when unfolded, how the books have fared so far in the postseason, and any insight he has today. He'll join us an hour number 3, as well as Thor Nystrom will run through the NFL draft with Thor. I'll hit you a little more NFL draft insight, too, coming up top of the hour. Of course, Shedeur Sanders landing in Cleveland. How does that fit ultimately there in Cleveland? I mentioned it going to break over at VSiN.com, one of the many things you get as a VSiN Pro subscriber with our VSiN Summer Special right now, $59 all the way through August 1st, VSIN.com/subscribe, are those betting splits. And people like to wonder, where are the people betting? So let's run through it for today. We'll start with the NBA. Right now, the Pistons a 2-point favorite against the New York Knicks. 53% of the bets at DraftKings on the Pistons and 56% of the handle. As for the money line, this isn't a shock. Usually when you do see these point spreads as close as this game is, Knicks +2, you're going to get Knicks money line money and you're going to get Pistons spread money. So the money line, 56% of the bets on the Knicks, 44% of the bets on the Pistons when looking at that money line. I would say this, and I know I'm a broken record and you hear it all the time, Knicks and Pistons with a spread like this, I think ultimately you can probably live trade this one, especially how this series has played. Do you get that first half bump, right? We've talked about it a lot. Pistons maybe a little overinflated in the first half, -2. So do you get that strong first half push here from the Pistons? But something that JVT did mention is in these particular spots, if you look at recent years, that first quarter, first half trend isn't necessarily as profitable as one would think. What about Lakers and T-Wolves? That point spread down to 2.5. It was 4 on Friday night. The Lakers tied it up late, 103-103, and then the 13-1 run for the Minnesota Timberwolves gave them that 116-104 run. Had Zach Cohen on just a moment ago. He put together a little alt-line parlay with the Pistons and the T-Wolves. I don't know what the juice was, but he took 7.5 with both the T-Wolves and the Pistons here. So getting around 9.5 points to work with there. But looking at the betting splits here, people are anticipating the Lakers to bounce back, and I tend to agree with Zach here. I'm not going to bet it, but I think that this is a bad matchup for the Lakers. And, LeBron was awesome on Friday night. He had 38 points, and they still came up on the wrong end. Now, granted, they did tie the game up. You're going to get a better performance from Luka, but I do think ultimately the price is right now on the Minnesota Timberwolves at -$2 favorite to win this series, but that would shift back if the Lakers were to win today. So I expect this to be an absolute war, and I would lean towards the Timberwolves. A bet that I did make last night was the Celtics -6.5. Zach and I are going to be on opposite sides here, so never like to be anti-Zach. Very sharp NBA mind there. And I also don't like this because I'm on the side of what seems to be the public, which is a little concerning there. 75% of the bets, 90% of the money on the Boston Celtics here in this particular spot, laying the 7. I was able to lay 6.5. So I am in on the Celtics. I think you get a pretty solid performance. But as Zach mentioned, he's banking on this Magic defense that has played very well, has made things challenging for the Boston Celtics. Obviously got that win on Friday night there, 95-93. Drew Holiday already has been ruled out. We'll see what Jaylen Brown's status ultimately is. It is worth noting, if you're a fan of just keeping an eye on market moves, well, the market is moving towards the Boston Celtics, as you see it on the screen right there for those of you watching with us, out to 7.5. Total has moved up a little bit too, out to 199. Over at the VSiN.com betting splits, 75% of bets on the Boston Celtics, 90% of the money. And looking at what Circa is having, it's on the flip side. The public is betting the Orlando Magic here at Circa, 77% of the bets. And then as for the nightcap, Pacers and Bucks. Pacers, a 4.5 point dog. Boy, kind of feels like, is this like a trap? Is this Admiral Akbar telling us it's a trap? Because I want to take the Pacers here. Gary Trent Jr. had the game of his life, and they overcame a double-digit deficit at the half, the Milwaukee Bucks. They won the game. They covered. But are you going to get that again? Now, worth noting, Giannis has just been otherworldly here in this postseason, honestly, all year long. I imagine he'll finish, third in the MVP race? Jokic and SGA 1-2 in some order, more than likely SGA going to win it. But, Yeah, we'll see how that plays. Giannis has been awesome this year, but 55% of the bets on the Pacers. So do you have a public dog situation brewing there with the Indiana Pacers against the Milwaukee Bucks? So once again, to circle back to best bets, which are always brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. For me, it'll be Celtics. I will lay the chalk here with the Boston Celtics. You heard from Zach Cohen. We're going Oppo. He took the points with the Orlando Magic. Zach also, his best bet is Julius Randle over 19.5 points in the T-Wolves and Lakers game. Hey, just a reminder, G-Bank is upping the ante with a $750 bonus for new G-Bank Visa Signature Card customers. First, new customers who spend $1,000 on eligible purchases within 90 days from account opening receive a $250 bonus. In addition, if you spend $50,000 on gaming and sports app loads within 30 days of account opening, you'll receive another $500 bonus. That's potentially a $750 bonus. Apply now, VSiN.com/GBank. That's VSIN.com/GBank. Subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions do apply. So 4 games on the NBA hardwood, starting with Knicks and Pistons. Lakers, T-Wolves follow. Best bet from Zach Cohen just a moment ago. Julius Randle over the 19.5. He also concocted a alt line parlay. Pistons to the T-Wolves, taking the points with both of them, so pushing favorites to dogs at plus 7.5. Not sure the juice that he put on that, but he did mention that here on the program. And then his only straight bet, he's going opposite of me, both he and I. He'll be on the Magic, I'll be on the Celtics, and I already hate my bet considering now I'm looking at the betting splits over at vsin.com. All right, as for the ice, we heard from Todd Fuhrman, and let's jump at what we're seeing from the ice here from a bet standpoint. How about this? The money line at DraftKings is out to a minus 130 on the Washington Capitals. Uncertainty on the goalie situation, but there are some minus 20s out there on the Washington Capitals and the Montreal Canadiens tonight. And from Todd, he said the only play he would look at would be the Washington Capitals. And since he was on the airwaves, we've seen a trickle up on the Washington Capitals, out to minus $1.24, minus 25 at the Westgate Superbook, 24 here at Circa. So he likes the Caps, and he also felt like once you hear the news, depending on the goalie situation, that maybe you look at under 6.5 if we ultimately get there. Right now, it's priced at 6.5, minus 25 at DraftKings. So potentially a wait and see situation there with the goalies. But for him, I had texted him just to clarify. He did like the Capitals at around a minus $1.20 price in that one. And the public, if you're wondering, at DraftKings does seem to like Washington in a bounce back spot here. 73% of the bets on the Washington Capitals. You know, what was interesting as Todd broke these games down, he did not seem to be really believing in the Edmonton Oilers. Felt like they're a very flawed team dealing with a handful of injuries. And the public disagrees, which is not a surprise. 70% of bets right now on the Edmonton Oilers. But I think Todd's approach is going to be a wait-and-see situation here with the Edmonton Oilers and the Kings. By the way, all 3 games in this series have gone over the total. So are you getting a little bit of an inflated total there? 66% of the bets, 78% of the handle on the over in Edmonton and LA. But I think Todd is going to wait and see. Do we get a plus 130 or so on the Los Angeles Kings? Right now, market sits as high as plus 120 here at Circa, minus 131 on Edmonton. It does feel like there's a little bit of support out there for the Los Angeles Kings at Circa. And then you've got Winnipeg, St. Louis. Once again, Winnipeg, a short road favorite at minus $1.25, 63% of the bets on the Jets at DraftKings. And then Carolina getting a whole lot of support at minus $1.80. And Todd didn't seem to agree necessarily with laying the chalk there with the Carolina Hurricanes. So once again, best bets we've had this hour from me. I will be in on the Boston Celtics, going opposite of Zachary Cohen. Zach's going to roll with the Magic plus the 7.5. I'll lay the chalk. I laid 6.5 last night with the Boston Celtics. Julius Randle over 19.5 points, courtesy of Zach Cohen. And then at minus 20, the Washington Capitals a play from Todd Fuhrman. Our best bets always brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. All right, 2 hours in the books. Plenty more to come. Patrick Everson in hour 2, Thor Nystrom in hour 2. as we take a look at some of the better hauls from the NFL draft and more thoughts on the quarterback situation brewing in Cleveland.